Welcome to Rise, Hope and Healing After Sexual Betrayal, where we feature weekly conversations with leading betrayal trauma experts. I'm MaryAnn Michaelis, your hostess. Before we get started, we want to make sure that you are aware of our corresponding online courses. We have a Rise course, which follows Season 1, focused on helping individuals in those very first betrayal stages, giving you information and tools for your recovery journey. We also have a course which focuses specifically on boundaries, an area that so many of our clients struggle with, to help you step by step create and maintain healthy boundaries. You can also find courses on communication, relationship, and many other topics, so please check them out at humanintimacy.com. Finally, you can find us at youtube.com/@human-intimacy. And please, if this podcast has been helpful for you, we invite you to like it and share it so that it can help our algorithms, so that we can help other people who may need support as well. Welcome back to Rise, Hope and Healing After Sexual Betrayal. I'm your hostess, MaryAnn Michaelis, and I am so thrilled to introduce our guest today. Her name is Rhyll Croshaw, and I'd love to invite you to check us out on YouTube because Rhyll is a pioneer. She's a woman who has blazed some of the significant trails of support and recovery in betrayal trauma. And Rhyll, you probably don't know this, but you're a big part of my own journey. And when I started my own recovery, I started reading a book and it basically said, you need to get divorced right now. And I was like, no, I'm not ready for that yet. And I opened up Rhyll's book and it was like, oh, okay, I can handle this. And so in my own personal journey, Rhyll's words were some of the very first words that have helped me along my path. So I'm grateful. And Rhyll, I would love for you to introduce yourself and tell us about how you got here.
It's such a long story. My husband and I have been married for 53 years. We have 7 children and 29 grandchildren and a great grandbaby that is the most adorable baby. And we have a long history. There's a lot of water under that bridge. We started SA Lifeline Foundation 17 years ago. I graduated from the university at the age of 59. And I wasn't going to write a book. I am not an author, but I knew the story had to be told. And so I wrote, What Can I Do About Me? 12 years ago. And I did an update on it 2 years ago with one of the chapters. What do you think? They're still together? That's pretty amazing. Is it really possible? And we have a very full life and do this work because God, through his grace, has given us many miracles.
So tell us what you do then.
Well, we started SA Lifeline Foundation 17 years ago with only one idea, and that it was possible to recover from pornography and sexual addiction. That was it. We had no idea about betrayal trauma. That came later in our recovery journey. It was just a matter of, here are some tools that we have found as we worked along this pathway, because it had been 32 years of marriage where my husband had been acting out, not every day, of course, but he could stop behavior for 3 years at a time. Now, when I say that to women, that scares the bejeebies out of them because they're like, wait, 3 years and then he goes back into it? This addiction, this behavior, this compulsion, whatever you want to call it, is cunning, powerful, and baffling. And so when we see it from that perspective, we also can say, if it is cunning, powerful, and baffling, what's it going to take to recover? A lot of effort. But on my side, what's it going to take for me to recover from the trauma? For 32 years of multiple betrayals.
So how far into your journey did you get therapy? Because like you said, betrayal trauma didn't start coming around till 2010, 2015 is where that really started to pop up.
Right. We started real recovery work in 2005. My husband's abstinence date is August 25 of 2005. We were getting some therapy, thankfully, with an excellent therapist. But even then, the term betrayal trauma was not used. And it was group therapy, and we were talking about codependency. Now, yeah, I'm the oldest of 9, mother of 7. I can really do codependent. But it didn't feel right to me that this was codependency. This felt different. And so in the parking lot one evening, therapist, not our therapist, who saw us came out and she said, "Do you know that you've had more trauma than most women? Betrayal trauma?" I was, "What? What does that mean?" And this was a number of years into our recovery, probably about 2010. But I have since learned, and when I wrote What Can I Do About Me, I did not want the word codependence anywhere in it. I wanted to make sure that it was betrayal trauma. Now, in the circle models that we have for women who are working recovery, it does show codependent behaviors as one of the behaviors. That doesn't mean that betrayal trauma is about codependency. It means that in our effort to try and keep ourselves safe, we start showing codependent behaviors. But I never tried to hide my husband's stuff. I always wanted to be honest about it. But after 32 years of the ups and downs, and first and second disclosures, at the third disclosure, it was, we have to be done. I can't do this anymore. He had gotten arrested for picking up a prostitute and had been able to keep that a secret for 2 weeks, but then couldn't stand the hypocrisy and the lies, and they came forward. And I often will talk to women about, there comes a point where we surrender it all over to God and say, I can't fix this. I can't change him. I can't take care of this. I can't do it. And I did on my front lawn that morning when I discovered he'd been arrested. He told me. And that Sunday morning, I literally raised my hands up to heaven and said, take him. I can't do this anymore. And from that day on, it was an effort on my part to just give it to God and say, it looks like we're going to be divorced. It looks like I'm going to need to find a new place to live. It looks like in my head what I would imagine our situation would end up like. But going back 20 years, our therapist in his office, the very first time we saw him, he's heard Stephen's story. And then he looked at me and he said, could you stay with him if he's in recovery? This is 20 years ago. And I was like, recovery? What does that look like? And I think that's what we want to talk about. What does recovery look like? And this is what I said to the therapist. I would not know because he's a masterful liar. And he said, you will know. What? For 32 years, I haven't known? That was a surprise. And you will know? I didn't question him so much at that, but about 5 years later, he was speaking at a conference that we were having, and I said, Todd, do you say you will know to every woman who comes in your office, all these thousands of women? He said, no. God told me to tell you that. You listen to God? And I said, you know what? I do know. And I think that's one of the main things that I strive to teach to other women. How do I know? How would I know? I have never said you should leave him, nor have I said you should stay with him. Not my business. Because this process is cunning, powerful, and baffling. And if we've lived with an addict for any amount of time, we start to doubt ourselves. We start to lose our capacity to figure out, is this truth or no? I do know where every woman can get her guidance, and that's a higher power, God of your understanding. But with our trauma brain, we have a really hard time understanding what that answer is. And so recovery is really required for me in order to know what that message is. Because there's so much jumbled up in my head. Is that truth? No, I don't think it's truth. Oh, no, he's lying. No, he's telling me the truth because he's crying. No, that's not the answer. And so the process was for me to become educated on what is this man that says, I'm not an addict. That's what my husband said. the second time around. He went to 4 12-step meetings and was just so disgusted that guy said, "I'm a recovering sex addict." He's like, "Those are weirdos." And he said, "I'm not like that." Like, "Are you kidding?" And he would not accept that the second time around. So that was 26, 27 years. So I have become educated on not only his addiction, but what the addiction walks like, talks like, thinks like. And that's why in my book, there is a roadmap. The roadmap is really helpful for women. And the circle model that SA Lifeline has is really helpful. We have a trifold of those circle models. And many times I have personally gotten it out and went, "This is what I'm feeling. This is what I'm seeing." So the other part is not only that I become educated on what it looks like, walks like, talks like, I learn to trust my instincts. In my book, I called it Trusting My Gut. And those of us who've lived with betrayal trauma have questioned our gut. We have questioned our instincts. And so relearning to trust this instead of that voice over here. That voice tends to be the loudest one in our heads sometimes. And so I need to spend some time removing myself from that voice and getting this voice more clear.
This voice, this is my partner, or this is just the voice in my head?
This is my
Okay.
partner first, but it also can be other people that say, "Oh, I know you should do this." But
Mm.
so many other people with opinions who have never experienced this. The first and loudest voice in my head is his voice. "I'm not doing anything. I'm fine. Things are fine. Don't worry. Maybe you're just imagining," that kind of stuff going on. We talked earlier about detaching with compassion. That's one of the boundaries that I personally use, and that is compassion for myself first.
What does that look like for you?
Compassion for myself is recognizing I have betrayal trauma. In our readings, in our SAL 12-step meetings, we say we may have been victimized, but we choose not to be paralyzed as victims. And that is so true for me. Okay, I have been victimized, recognizing the reality, and then choosing to not be paralyzed in that place. And one that's in the circle models is self-care. I've many times said to women who called me, "When did you eat last?" Or, "Have you had a drink of water this morning?" And sometimes it's just go get some protein and fruit and take a big glass of water and then call me back. And in trauma, we're either way overeating or we won't eat. We're not taking care of ourselves.
So I want to slow us down a little bit to introduce a couple of topics that you've mentioned. I'm loving hearing you speak about this, because when you're talking about trusting your gut, my clients hear me. And if you're listening to this podcast, you've heard me all the time say, trust your gut, trust your gut, trust your gut. And I didn't recall that that came from your book. And so I'm connecting in all these places. But going back to two things I'd like to have you talk about maybe right here. The first one is you mentioned the roadmaps for recovery. And so those are in the back of the book of
Uh-huh.
the "What Can I Do About Me" right here, or
Right.
unless you have one handy there as well.
Yeah.
No, and what I love about these is it's two columns, one's in gray and one's not in gray, and it says the roadmap one is he working recovery? And it's I'm not serious about changing if I lie, if I'm evasive, or if I disclose information only when asked. That's the one side. The other side of it is I am serious about changing if I'm honest and open. And so these are helpful for my clients when I have no idea. I'm trying to listen to my gut, but as you said, there's so much chatter in my brain and it's hard to know. These are some things that I can at least watch some actions. And
Yes.
and I say all the time, watch feet, not words. We watch where they're going, what they're doing, but we're also listening to that gut because it's so easy to check the boxes. I'm doing all the things, but it doesn't feel quite right. Where did these come from?
Because I wrote this 12 years ago, I was trying to remember, and I think this was from a sponsee that I had. I'm
Mm.
pretty sure a woman that I was working with, and she spent some time on this after we had worked recovery, and I don't think she cared that she had credit, but from her own experience, she put these together. The circle models that we have are definitely from our experience working with thousands of people and recognizing the cunning, powerful, and baffling nature of this and how traumatic it is for women who have been in a relationship that seems so skewed from truth.
Explain to us, what is the circles model look like?
The circle models in SA Recovering Individuals, Healing Families. The first one is the circle of the self-absorbed personality. And on our website, you can go get these and copy them off. But in that circle, it's withdrawn, manipulative, resentful, lying, lustful, tired. Now, isn't that an interesting one?
Yeah.
I've never seen my husband act out. And many, many women have never seen any proof of their husbands acting out. So it's not like you can see him drinking the alcohol or smoking or doing drugs. It's all here. So how do we trust? How do we trust that this man is actually working recovery? Well, these are the behaviors that show up. The victim attitude, restless, shaming, bored, fear, anger. So what we do is go to the circle model of living in recovery. And that is connected with God at the center instead of the self-absorbed personality. This takes time. I would refer you to the recovery puzzle, which is in the same book. And there are 11 pieces actually in the recovery puzzle, qualified therapy, the education about this. So it's not just a one and done thing. SAL 12 steps is specifically for this behavior and betrayal trauma. That's why we say recovering individuals, healing families. That has been critical for us. It's important for us that our family have healing as well as other people have that option.
So you're looking at it from a whole system.
A whole system. Yeah.
Okay.
Qualified therapy, quality education, 12-step. These pieces are critical, but the main piece of this is the willing heart. The willing heart is critical. And if a person doesn't have it, this is the page where it is. If that willing heart is not there, there's no recovery. Now, maybe in a few months, he might come around and say, I want this bad enough to do the hard work. So we don't know. And so we're going to give it some time. I'm going to work my recovery. I always say, light attracts light. Darkness will go away from light. So my opportunity is to work my recovery and have more light in my life. And when I do, I'm promised that light will be attracted to me. Now, if that person chooses darkness, he'll go away. It may take months, if not a couple of years or even more. I don't know. But darkness will go away from the light. But the more light I get, the better off I am. If darkness goes away, and that's my husband, that is sad. And I will grieve that. But it's not awful. It's not the worst thing. That means I have more light. And when I have more light, I will have more peace, more serenity, more direction. And again, I've never said you should stay with him. You should leave him. Not my business. But I do know that when we work recovery, when we understand what we're dealing with, not only from his perspective, but from our trauma, and we work to recover from that and find the God of our understanding at our center, that's the key for us. So what if I am so confused about whether my husband's willing to work recovery? Well, you can check the boxes. He can go to 12-step meetings. He can go to therapy. He can have a sponsor and still lie. So the key is trust my gut and hold boundaries around that. Something is off. No, everything's fine. Look, I'm checking the boxes. Too many men and women think that recovery is abstinence. Hey, I have 350 days sober. Yay for you. However, that is not it. If you're still resenting me and blaming me and yelling at me and angry and frustrated, even though I'm not perfect, if you're reacting like that, instead of taking the pause to respond and go, my recovery is not only sobriety, it's step 0 in 12 step. 0. And so many think that's the end all. No.
So let me just clarify that.
Yeah.
From a listener perspective, you might be like, wait, what did you just say about step 0? What I'm hearing you say is sobriety, getting sober is step 0. And then you start the 12 steps. That's the
Yes.
foundation. That's what I'm hearing you say?
Step 0 is we stop.
Stop the behavior.
We stop the behavior.
Yeah.
If we continue the behavior, there is no moving forward. So stopping the behavior is a big deal.
Mm.
It's hard. But with that willing heart, things do change. And if the guy has that willing heart and he does go to 12 step and he does his therapy and he has a sponsor that he calls every day, sounds like a lot of work. Yeah. But it becomes less and less of a challenge the further away you get. I mean, if my husband was standing here, sitting here, and he'd say that he had to stop. His sobriety date is August 25th of 2005. And people like, no, not possible. But how would I know if he's not telling me the truth? Because he lied for 32 years, right?
Right, right.
That's a scary place to be. Because, wait, is that possible? So I hold my boundaries around those behaviors. Victim, blame, resentment. Oh, resentment is a big, big one. If you're resenting me, I'm going to hold my boundary. We're going to sleep separate.
And what I'm hearing you say, Rhyll, which I really love, because we haven't talked about this part in this podcast series. I'm hearing the things that you're talking about holding your boundaries around, they're emotions. And this isn't a behavior that actually happened. This is an emotion that's showing up. This is a relational attitude that you're talking about. So we're not just saying, don't take your phone into the bathroom, or don't look at pornography, or don't text somebody, or whatever it is. You're saying, don't come at me with resentment. Don't come at me with abuse. Don't come at me with anger and frustration. These are areas that we also need boundaries around, because they destroy the relationship.
And they're connected to the behavior. And that's why I say, when our therapist said, you will know, then I started to learn what the markers of the behavior are.
So these are the symptoms.
These are the symptoms of sickness. And I say often, let's separate the addiction from the person.
Mm-hmm.
This person has a sickness. Does that mean that I'm going to enable that? No, because it's a life-crippling sickness and behavior. I'm not going to enable that by saying, oh, well, it doesn't matter. So if I feel like my husband is disconnected, he was never an angry addict. He was a disconnected one, and a lot of shame. Wow, wait. And the guy with the newspaper, back in the newspaper days, in the big chair, when the kids are running around and he's not connected at all. That was my husband. So if I feel the disconnection coming back in, which I haven't for a long time, but this is 20 years of work. But if I feel the disconnection, I speak it. Something's off. And I wrote about it. The first experience that I really held my boundary, when I felt like, there wasn't anything that gave me proof that something was off and wrong, but I just felt it. I feel like you're disconnected. No, everything's fine. That's what he said to me. Trust my gut. And finally, third time, after about 20 minutes, he says, well, the other day, he had a lust trigger. And he told me, this girl on a skateboard with a bare back. And I was like, that's a lust trigger. because we don't, as women, we don't really know what some of those lust triggers are.
Sure.
And I said, well, yeah, I'm going to go with it because we have a boundary. We have a boundary. If he had a lust trigger, he didn't do anything about it, but he had a lust trigger. If he hasn't said anything within 24 hours, we're going to sleep separate. That's our boundary. He's okay with it, but we want to sleep together. So I said, well, when was that? The next question. That was Monday. Because all of a sudden it's starting to click for him. Said, well, today's Wednesday. Oh. And there was silence. And he said, I'll be sleeping separate. My codependent reaction, perhaps betrayal trauma reaction, was, oh dear, now I've gotten honest. And it's only been 2 days. That was my first thought. And my gut said, don't you go there. You hold that. You must hold that. And I said, okay. We went to bed, separate rooms, very amicably. And when I finally got into bed, I was like, oh, that's exactly what I needed to do. I would have never done that before recovery. I would have folded. Yeah. We're both learning how to hold these safety boundaries. And I think every single woman and every single man involved must learn how to hold those without anger, without resentment. But that's where I say, let's detach with compassion. We used to say detaching with love. That's a little too
Lovey.
And in a situation with sex addicts, most of us can't go there.
Right. You're so hurt and burned.
So hurt. And so detaching with compassion feels better. Compassion for my own feelings and hurt, and yet not being in that victim place, not staying there. It's okay to feel sad and to call my sponsor and say, this is so hard. But to stay there will make me a bitter old woman. And I don't want to be that. I want to flourish.
Well, you're flourishing beautifully. For our listeners last week, Dr. Skinner specifically said, we don't often say to our spouse, here's my boundary. And our spouse says, oh, goody, that's a great one. I love that. Usually there's that resistance, but I'm hearing you talk about detaching with compassion. Your husband's response was, yeah, I know what the boundary is. Yep, this is what I need to do. And I love that you shared that example because it just flows right into the example Dr. Skinner gave last week. And so we know it is possible. We know that it happens. There's another component of this that we didn't exactly touch on, but I think is really important here. And I'm wondering for you, especially how it's impacted you or how you've learned to deal with it. But one of the pieces of the puzzle, I believe, unless it's been updated, is rigorous honesty.
Yes.
And when you've been lied to over and over again, just speak to that a little bit, if you would, with the boundaries and your experience with that.
Rigorous honesty is critical. So if my husband says he's going to be home at 6, he will be home at 6. It used to be like, well, but then I got caught up. No. If rigorous honesty is not happening, I have a boundary. Because there is such a tendency to lie and hide and just manipulate it just a little bit. So in our relationship, if there is not rigorous honesty with a man who's dealing with this, there's no hope. If he's holding stuff back, he cannot recover. As long as he's withholding anything, and we've seen it over and over and over again. They minimize, justify, deny little bits. One of the most important books we've read is Anna Lemke, Dopamine Nation. She talks about rigorous honesty in recovery from any addiction. And we have found that to be so critical. And so rigorous honesty also brings a sense of humility and accountability on a daily basis. My husband and I continually, after 20 years, we check in with each other every night. And we do the vowel check-in, A, I, O, U, and Y. And we have this little routine.
When I first read your book, I tried the daily check-in. It was too much, too overwhelming. Like every day, here's some new data. And so Do you have any thoughts on that?
If he hasn't stopped and you're just getting bits and pieces, it's way too much trauma. So stopping is step 0.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it used to be just lust triggers, but he added anger and resentment as he worked recovery because he knows that that is what fuels his addiction. And I always say that resentment is the fuel of a person's addiction. If I can resent somebody, and it's usually the spouse, if I can resent her, and this spouse might be a literal angel with a little glow around her head, and he would still resent her because that's his deal. It's his fuel. So if I can resent her, then I'm justified in acting up. And I think a check-in is really challenging. And you have to be working with a really great therapist so that you're not continually getting triggered.
And let me add to that too, because there's a part here that I was missing, and that's just part of my journey. But what was missing, and the way that I see check-ins is, if I'm checking in and saying like, I had this thought, I saw something or whatever, the part that was missing for us at least was, and then I reached out to my sponsor, and then I reached out to somebody, and this is what I did about it. If that component is happening, and I look at that as accountability and transparency. I want my spouse to be transparent about something happened today, but I also want the accountability of this is what I did about it, and this is who I showed up to and worked through it with. And that part was missing, which was the triggering part. But I think when it's there, that's that rigorous honesty.
Yeah. And that critical, especially it's important that if he had something happen during the day, his opportunity is to call his sponsor, work it through, and by the end of the day, can talk to me about how he worked it through, not just dump it on me. I am not a sponsor. I'm not his mother. You work it through with a guy that's going to hold your feet to the fire and call you out. But also listen with empathy. And that's why 12-step is so critical. 12-step is guys that understand this. They're further down the path. They know that other guys are justifying, minimizing, and denying. Like, oh, that's a justification. And so then if he's done that work earlier, then it's important for him to say, I have this situation come up. I called my sponsor. We worked through it, and I just wanted you to know. Okay, it might hurt a bit, especially early on. But for us to think that there's perfection on there are no lust triggers is like, really? The world is filled with. But we are not their sponsors, and we're not their dumping ground. Somebody else who knows this, like a sponsor, is critical. And then they need to be honest and transparent with us.
I love that. I know with SA Lifeline that there's 12-step support groups, but you also mentioned the foundation. Talk a little bit about what those are.
Well, we started the foundation 17 years ago. It was hope for recovery from sexual addiction, period. And we have a painting. These 2 guys on horses running to rescue this pioneer group. That was it. And then we had one book that was brought to us and we published it. And then we added another Understanding Pornography and Sexual Betrayal Trauma manual that we wrote. And then 12 years ago, we determined with a lot of experience with SA and S&on, which we love. My husband worked SA for 10 years or less every week. He drove to Salt Lake from our home and 2 hours back and forth. He loved his SA group. It changed his life. He also found a sponsor that held his feet to the fire in a very positive way. But 12 years ago, we determined, because we own the building where much of this work is going on, and the SA meetings and the S&on meetings are not gender specific. We had a situation come up where there were young women joining the men's groups for sexual addiction. And a situation happened. I was like, not in my house. And I made a phone call to a therapist I knew in a different state. And I said, what do we do about these start your own 12-step meetings? Like, what? I don't want to do that. We have loved SA and S&M, but this is something we've got to do. And within about a week's time, we had started our own groups. And we now have 55 plus meetings a week that reach around the world in person and many of them online.
For both SA and betrayal trauma.
Yes. And that has been really, really helpful for thousands of people because we knew that it had to be not just recovering from addiction. We had to do both because our motto being recovering individuals, healing families, we needed both sides to be able to heal. And I do believe my husband could have been working recovery. If I had not, I still would have divorced him because I would have been living in so much fear.
Can you speak to what was it in those 32 years that gave you the hope that you didn't give up?
It's so complex and yet so simple. When it happened 20 years ago, I decided it was over. I mean, it looked like everything that was falling down was like, you should be done with this marriage. And the key was, I asked God, I don't get voices, but the feeling was, stick with me. And the feeling also was, you don't have to trust him, trust me. I was like, okay, this is hard. I'm going to trust the God of my understanding, which has really grown and expanded and a little bit different than 20 years ago. But I kept saying, really? Can't I leave? Because this is so painful. Just trust me. And that's why I say it's so critical to get this clear on a daily basis as much as possible. And then keep asking. Don't plead and beg. Just say, what's the next right thing?
Yeah. Thank you. I love that. And I would add, I really believe all of these principles also apply to men. We have betrayed men and we don't talk very much about them, but these all apply, I think, universally to all individuals who've been betrayed. So
Yes.
I appreciate everything you've talked about, but so many times I know in even my own story, being betrayed, there aren't a lot of people who say, hey, we've been together for 53 years, walking this path and we're still together. There aren't a lot of stories like that or people who speak about that openly. And so I appreciate that you're a beacon of hope saying, oh, somebody did it. There's a way through this. What is the message that you'd like to share as we wrap up today?
I just know the pain, the trauma, and yet I know the blessings. And there are gifts. There are gifts of working recovery. Some of the most brave women I know are now divorced from addicts, but they continue to work this and gain that light. And as they gain that light, their families are prospering. And so I think the key is keep striving to have the God of your understanding at your center and follow. I do believe it all works out. And I will say that our marriage after 53 years is better than it was 30 years ago. In all ways. Sexually, intimately, emotionally, God is good.
Thank you, Rhyll. Thank you so much. I am so appreciative for your time, for you being here, and for the work that you're doing. Can you just share with us your website, just for anybody who might be interested? Because I know you had referenced some images. So where would people go to find us?
SALifeline.org and SAL12step.org.
All right. Thank you so much, Rhyll.
You're welcome.
If this podcast has been helpful for you, we invite you to like it and share it so that it can help our algorithms, so that we can help other people who may need support as well.